Hello and welcome to 3Q. In this episode, I'm delighted to be talking with Matthew Cushen, co-founder of Worth Capital, an early stage investor. Good morning, Matthew. How are you today?
Morning, very well. The sun is out. It's warm and sweaty.
Yes, it certainly is. My first question is, do you think the UK government's done enough to support business throughout the pandemic?
Yeah, I think they've done a remarkable amount, really. And if you kind of benchmark our response against other governments around the world, you can see that the kind of number of things and the value of things that we've done has been huge. But actually, I think what's less said is that they've done it quickly. And I think actually that's been a big part of the value. Now, some things have been a bit rough around the edges. You know, there'll be a load of bounce back loans that don't get paid back. And actually there'll be some bounce back loans that, you know, will pay for a Ferrari or whatever. But the speed of response was actually more important, I think, than the kind of granularity of the response. So I think on that score, they've done a good job. As far as the Treasury is concerned, I would say that in other parts of government that have a big impact upon business, that's not necessarily the same. So I think when you look at what Gavin Williamson has done or not done in education, I think that's an absolute travesty. And I think it's a travesty for young people now. It's a travesty for the skills and the capability that our future workforce will have, but also it's a travesty for businesses getting back to work, because obviously we need our kids in school being looked after so parents can work.
I agree with you, actually, that the UK government acted quickly, but what would you have done differently?
I think one of the things that doesn't help is when they kind of inadvertently created a bit of a cliff edge. Because I think what works well is when they kind of give businesses pause for thought, give businesses hope, and give kind of businesses a reason to kind of continue and kind of hang on in there and adapt and give them time and breathing space. So I think if you looked at furlough in its first iteration, where it was kind of 3 months and then a cliff edge, I think they were quite right to come back and iterate that again and then put in a little bit of a tapered approach to it. So more about part-time and a kind of like gradually reducing percentages. I think the other thing that they could do more of, I think, is where they're kind of nudging people to do the right thing and kind of nudging people to do the things they could do, whether that's consumers. So, for example, I ate out to help out last night, and it was fantastic. You know, it was really buzzing in a way that I hadn't seen restaurants buzzing like that for a long time. But, you know, and it was a small nudge in the right direction. It kind of, you know, got me off my sofa into a restaurant, but it was only a tenner. And actually, I was thinking, if a restaurant was trying to scam that, there's not really that much point, because the government's going to get much of that back in VAT, taxes, etc. anyway. So actually, it's a good way to put some cash into the hospitality sector, but based upon me doing the kind of right thing as a consumer. I think you can also see that, you know, with things like the Future Fund. Now, I kind of think that they got that wrong, because I think it was a bit of a stitch up for a group of venture capitalists that could really benefit from it, you know, and you could uncharitably see that as kind of Rishi's mates from his previous life. And that wasn't, and I kind of don't think that was particularly nudging them to do the right thing. I think that it was actually kind of giving them a pretty big bloody subsidy on what they should have been doing anyway, and the responsibility that they should have been taken for their existing investments. So I think it's about nudging, but kind of nudging with the right kind of level.
The news this morning, to be expected, was that UK's dropped into quite a deep recession. What do you think UK businesses can do to help the economy recover?
I'd say three things. So first up, and by the way, these are particularly acute in a recession, but that's probably three things I'd say anyway. But so one is being really close to your consumer, whether that's a consumer or a business consumer, being really close to how their behaviours have changed and are changing. Because in all my business life, and as well as being a VC, I'm also an innovation consultant for very large businesses like IKEA and AB InBev. I've never seen behaviours change so quickly and so dramatically and so deeply as over the last few months. And I don't think these are temporary things. I think businesses that have got their ear to the ground, that are relentlessly curious about what's going on, will see the kind of insight that will be valuable to them as to and therefore lead them to how they can innovate and how they can change their business models. So one is relentless curiosity. The second thing, I think, is carrying on investing. So, and that's investing in the intangibles like marketing, R&D, training. Every time you look at performance coming out of recessions, you see there's a correlation between businesses that have continued to invest in those intangibles and their success over the next 3, 5, 10 years. And then also carry on innovating, but kind of doing that in quite a controlled way. So making sure that you've got that insight, that you are thinking about new ideas off the back of that insight, but you're experimenting in a very controlled way. And when I say experimenting, I mean fast, quick ways to learn to experiment with individual elements of ideas and understand what works and what doesn't before you spank a whole load of capital investment or a whole load of time and effort, and kind of iteratively experiment yourself towards the answer.
Matthew, some very interesting insights there. I think businesses could do well to listen to the comments and the advice you've given. Thank you very much for appearing on 3Q.
My pleasure.